Good day everyone and welcome back to Not London Narratives. Today guys we're going to be talking about Ange Postecoglou, and this is a very good one because I feel like I've put so much effort into this to go into details. So I'm going to explain to you people today why I think that Tottenham Hotspur's problem isn't just injuries, but actually the manager, Ange Postecoglou, is simply not good enough. So, to start with, last season, Tottenham Hotspur finished 5th. Tottenham Hotspur had an XG of 62.8 and an XG against of 63.4. The difference across the whole season was 4.8. This season, Tottenham Hotspur have an XG of 38.8 and an XG against of 38.5. The difference is 0.4. Mind you, Tottenham Hotspur are missing a lot of players, and the difference is barely 4.4 goals. That's the difference so far this season, and we've been missing a lot of our players. So last season, Tottenham Hotspur finished 5th in the Premier League. Tottenham Hotspur played in the FA Cup and lost in the 4th round to Manchester City. That was our second match in the competition, I believe, after we had just played Burnley. I think we also left the Carabao Cup in our first match in the competition to Fulham. We were not in Europe last season. We were playing one game a week, and we finished 5th. We still found a way to bottle top 4 after having 26 points, I believe, in the first 10 games. Yeah, so 26 points out of a possible 30. We still found a way to not finish in the top 4. By the way, 26 points is more than we've had after about 23 games this season. We still are on, I think, 24, and that was after the first 10 games last season. So 10 games last season, in the first 10 games last season, we have more points than we've had this season across 23 games. And I know some people are going to say injuries. We're going to get into that, and I will explain to you why the injuries we have are not necessarily an excuse, because this is something that just didn't start this season. So I just established the fact that Tottenham Hotspur were playing one game a week, and we still managed to finish 5th in the Premier League last season. We went out of the Carabao Cup in the first match, went out of the FA Cup in our second match, we're not in Europe, and we're playing one game a week, and we finished 5th with players like Udogi, players like Van de Ven, players like Romero, players like Vicario, players like Pedro Porro, Bentancur, Bissouma, Son, Richarlison, Maddison, Brennan Johnson, who was Ange's priority signing after Harry Kane left, Kulusevski. You guys get the idea. We had a lot of top quality players, or decent players at least, and we still finished 5th. But anyways, that is not even in any way the most significant point I have. So our players came back in January, because some people are going to say, oh, but Ange had injuries, there's context to it. Our players came back in January. Our first match in 2024 was on January 14th. From January 14th to the end of the season, we played 18 games. Mind you, our players came back in January. The remaining 18 games, we won 8, we drew 3, and we lost 7. So out of 18 games, we lost 7, drew 3, won 8. That's, we draw points in 10 games and won only 8. Now, this is not very different from this season as well, and I'll show you. 7 out of the 7 losses that we had after the first 10 games, 5 of them came in, or after January, sorry, in January, or from January rather. out of the 7 losses we had in from January, 5 of them came in the last, I think 7 games. In the last 7 games, during this period, we had our starting XI that we used for most of the season. So we had likes of Son, we had likes of Kulu, we had likes of, I think, Bentancur. I'm not sure, but I think Bissouma was available. I think Sal was available. I know Madison was available. I know Van de Ven and Romero were available, and I know Pedro Porro was available. Vicario was available. The only player that was not available was, I think, Udogi, who had an injury late into the season, late into the season, and we lost 5 of the last 7 games, and in the first 10 games, we won 8 and we drew 2, making it 26 points in the first 10 games. In the remaining 28 games of the season under Ange Postecoglou, we got 40 points. And I know some people are going to say, oh, but we did very well, extremely well, better than the Invincibles in the first 10 games. Okay, remove the first 10 games. Forget the fact that we got 26 points in the first 10 games, and in close to 3 times that we got only 40 points. Forget that. Throw that inside the bin. That's not enough to convince you that this manager is not good enough. In the 28 games we played, we got 40 points, which is 1.4 points per game. You heard me? 1.4 points per game. This was after the remaining 28 games, after the first 10 games, 1.4 points per game. Okay, no problem. Players were out in January. You're seeing 28 games. There's context. The players were out in January. Taslim, calm down. All right. Players were out in January. From January 14th, which is when, like I said, we played our first game in January. We played 18 games. Like I said, we won 8, drew 3, and lost 7. That's 1.5 points per game. That's when our players were back. We had 1.5 points per game. That's 0.1 points more than the whole 28 games. So it really didn't make any much of a difference. The last five games in the league that Van de Ven played when he was around this season. Now let's move to this season. I've highlighted how bad we were last season and how much the first 10 games covered up the cracks. But let's move on to this season. So the last 5 games in the Premier League that Van de Ven was around for, the last 5 games he played in the Premier League before he injured, we lost 3 of them. The 3 games were, we lost to Chelsea, we lost to Crystal Palace, and we lost to Brighton. We won against United, we ended up sacking their manager because it was absolutely awful. And, well, I think it was awful, to be fair. Forget that. But West Ham, who their fans wanted them to sack their manager as well because he was doing an absolutely awful job as well, and he ended up losing his job. He has been replaced now. When the last 5 games that Romero was available, we lost 3 as well. We lost to Ipswich, we lost to Chelsea, and we lost to Crystal Palace. Romero and Van de Ven were injured game week 15 against Chelsea. But before that, I think Van de Ven got injured on October 30th and Romero got injured on November 22nd against the match before Ipswich. So before Van de Ven's injury on October 30th, we were 8th. Mind you, we had both Romero and Van de Ven available. This is before our centre-backs even got injured. We had the full team and the centre-backs were the first to go out. So we had the full team. At this point in the season, we're 2 points from 14th. This is when Romero and Van de Ven were available. We're 2 points from 14th with 4 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. This was with Romero with his whole starting 11, all his players, his Vicario, his everything. He had everything. And we had 4 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. That was, and we're 8th. That's 9 games into the season. Van de Ven was then injured, but mind you, Ange had brought in Dragishin last January because we know that Van Ven tends to get injured due to how the manager plays. So this is a signing that Ange brought in. He said we needed him, we beat Bayern Munich to him, no problem. So Dragishin comes in. Romero was injured on the 22nd of November. By then, which was, I think, 2 games after, by then, we had 5 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw. Not exactly very different from where we were with Van de Ven. At this point in the season, when Romero got injured, Tottenham Hotspur were 10th. We're 10th when Romero got injured. We're already 10th, banging on the door for the bottom table. We're 4 points away from West Ham in 14th, and everybody was talking about how West Ham and Lopetegui was doing a very horrible job. We were 4 points away from West Ham in 14th. So a lot of people talking about how injuries. We were bad before the injuries. We're bad last season, and we're bad this season before the injuries. We're 10th, like I said, before Romero got injured. And Dragishin was there, so you can't tell me, oh, Van de Ven. He signed Dragishin, so Dragishin was there. When Romero and Van de Ven were available, we're 8th. But no problem, it's all fine. This is where it gets funny, yeah? At this point in the season, everybody was talking about how Tottenham were only 3 points from 3rd. Forgetting that, at that point of the season, a lot of the big teams had played each other. And this is something I had conversations with my friends about, because I was like, a lot of people do not know that this table is lying. And as this season goes on, the gap is going to increase between Tottenham and everybody else. And I have proven to be right. Some people will say, oh, it's injuries. Like I said, even before the injuries, we weren't exactly doing well. So Spurs had barely played any big team that was doing well. We had played Villa, who were doing well. We played Newcastle, who had quite a bad start to the season. We had played United, who were horrible, as we knew. And Arsenal, and when we played Arsenal, I think they didn't have Rice and they didn't have Odegaard. So this was an Arsenal side that I think even going into that game, a lot of Spurs fans were very optimistic, and I remember them scoring, I think, a set-piece goal, Gabriel. So yes, those were the big teams we played. Now, mind you, everybody was saying we're 3 points away from 3rd. Within that same time frame, this was before Romero and Van de Ven got injured. When Romero and Van de Ven were still available, there was only 2 matches between Romero and Van de Ven's injuries. And I said Dragishin came in to replace my brother, Van Ven. So now, within that same time frame, when we're sitting 10th, the following teams had played each other. We had seen Chelsea versus City. We had seen Arsenal versus Villa. We had seen Manchester United versus Liverpool. We had seen West Ham versus Chelsea. We had seen City versus Arsenal, Newcastle versus City, Villa versus Man U, Liverpool versus Chelsea, West Ham versus Man U, Chelsea versus Newcastle, Arsenal versus Liverpool, Newcastle versus Arsenal, Man U versus Chelsea, Liverpool versus Villa, and Chelsea versus Arsenal. All these games had happened before the Romero injury, which is exactly why Tottenham were 3 points behind 3rd, because a lot of the big teams had been playing each other and taking points off each other. So everybody's taking points off everybody, and it's like nobody's moving because we've not started playing the bottom clubs yet. We're all beating each other. And now, when all that went away, we started to see what Tottenham Hotspur really were under Ange Postecoglou. This list that I just mentioned, and these fixtures I just mentioned, are with the exclusion of the games against the likes of Forest and Bournemouth, who have absolutely been flying this season. So I didn't even include the games against Forest and Bournemouth. I didn't include that because we know, I think Forest beat these guys this season, Liverpool this season. I think Forest also beat, I think Bournemouth. I don't know, but a lot of teams have been beating a lot of people. I know Chelsea 2 points off Bournemouth and all these things, funny things that were happening early on in the season. So a lot of these big teams, like I said, have played each other. Let me repeat the fixtures for you. Chelsea versus City, Arsenal versus Villa, Manchester United versus Liverpool, West Ham versus Chelsea, City versus Arsenal, Newcastle versus City, Villa versus Man U, Liverpool versus Chelsea, West Ham versus Man U, Chelsea versus Newcastle, Arsenal versus Liverpool, Newcastle versus Arsenal, Man U versus Chelsea, Liverpool versus Villa, Chelsea versus Arsenal. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 big games amongst the remaining top, what? Would I call them 7 clubs? Because I added Newcastle to 6 clubs actually, because Tottenham is out of it. No, 7, 8. No, there's a top 6. 7, because I added Villa and Newcastle to the traditional top 6. So yeah. So these guys are 7, 6, I don't even know. No, that's 5, 6, 7. 7, yeah, 7 clubs. So yeah, so all these clubs had been playing each other, and everybody's like, oh, Tottenham Hotspur are just 3 points away from top 4, but forgetting that there's context to Tottenham Hotspur being that close to the top. It's the league was absolutely lying, and that's what I was trying to explain to people, that we've been horrible under this manager and we're not doing well, and this league is lying because a lot of the big teams are playing each other, and when they stop playing each other, we're going to see Tottenham Hotspur for what they truly are. Now, as stated earlier, we were 10th. Even with the big games that happened, we were 10th. 10th with all these big games that happened earlier in the season. Since game week 11, Tottenham Hotspur have gained 24 points. We've gained 8 points. We gained 8 points in the next 12 games. Because, like I said, when Romero and Van de Ven were injured, we were on 16 points. No, I didn't mention that, but we're on 16 points. And now we're on 24 points. So we've gained 8 points in 12 games. 8 points in 12 games. Against Leicester, we had players like Pedro Porro, Dragishin, Ben Davies, Bentancur, Sa, Son, Richarlison, and Kulu in the lineup. Fatigue or no fatigue, let's call it spade a spade. That lineup should be beating Leicester, who had lost 7 in a row and were away from home at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. This wasn't even at Leicester Stadium. If it was at Leicester Stadium, I would understand. But Leicester had lost 7 in a row, were low on confidence, and came to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and beat us. And this isn't the first time we have seen this season. Because I think we got beat by Wolves, who are in a relegation battle. We've gotten beaten by Ipswich. This was even before the injuries got bad. We've gotten beaten by Palace. This was before the injuries got bad. We've gotten beaten by Everton this season. We've gotten beaten by Leicester. Like, this shows us that this manager is not good enough. Because they have worse managers. They have worse players. So what exactly is your excuse? Like, what is your excuse? Like, brother, what is your excuse? Now, do I blame Daniel Levy for certain things? Without a doubt. I think he has wronged us in massive ways, and he needs to leave the club. But I made a video focusing on Levy. If you want to know about that, you can go and watch it. Check my channel, you can go and watch it. But I'm not going to talk about that again because I don't want to sound like a broken record. I get it. There's so many things to blame Levy for. But Tottenham Hotspur should not be sat 10th after 11 games with 16 points after a possible 33. Should we? And this exact thing I just mentioned was before injuries to both Romero and Van de Ven. We were sat 10th after 11 games with 16 points out of 33. 16 out of 33. This is before the injuries. So before the injuries, we were bad. People can try to hide Ange behind the injuries for if I'm being honest. But if I'm being honest, and I'm going to call it spade a spade, this manager isn't good enough for this football club. And if anything, the best thing to happen to Ange Postecoglou this season is that the players, a lot of our players are injured. Because if not, this man would have been sacked ages ago. Because he has no excuse for some of the results we're getting. I just needed to bring out the numbers, bring out the facts, bring out the stats, bring out everything, evidence, because this is not things I made up. Like, As you can tell, I barely looked at the screen since because I wrote them down. I went to do my research and I brought out the facts. Like, this is not deniable. These are facts. These are facts. And I had to bring out the facts because the word around the fan base, and even Ange himself has been, oh, injuries, and we're playing Kinekan. Brother, we weren't good before the injuries. We weren't. We were not good before the injuries. We weren't good last season. We weren't good last season. We weren't good this season. And we haven't been good even before the injuries. But everybody now is coming out conveniently and saying injuries. But this has nothing to do with injuries. Injuries are no injuries. We should be beating Ipswich, no? We should be beating Leicester, no? We should be beating Wolves, no? We should be beating Palace, no? Palace that got their first win of the season against us. Ipswich, the same thing. Everton, they used us to do manager bounce. Leicester, they have not won in 7. Dr. Tottenham, take. Like, what are you guys saying? And these are not even the big clubs. These are even the bottom relegation for that people that I mentioned here. That I selectively pick them. Because, okay, I can understand clubs that sort of have a certain caliber of players like Brighton. I can understand. Is it acceptable? No, but I can understand Brighton beating you, but not Wolves, not Ipswich, not Palace, not Everton, not Leicester. Like, for God's sake, these are the clubs around us. Because we're in a relegation battle with this manager. These are the clubs around us. If anything, we all know that when you're in a relegation battle, the bare minimum you can do is to beat the clubs around you. We're not even doing that. No. So yeah, I just needed to get this off my chest because a lot of the fan base have been talking about injuries and that's not entirely true. Yes, I do understand that injuries have had an effect, but we've been bad before the injuries. We're bad last season after our players came back. This season, we're bad before our players started getting injured. And this manager is clearly not good enough for this club and should be sacked in my opinion. Because it's not just injuries. And the last thing I want to say is the absolute hypocrisy. So I just went to YouTube and I typed Erik ten Hag. And one of the first things I saw was chill, I'm coming. Where is it? When I scroll down, I saw something on Gary Neville saying that the fact that the quote from the video 3 months ago, the name of the video, if you want to search for it, Gary Neville reacts to Erik ten Hag sacking. The fact they are 14th is unacceptable. Tottenham Hotspur are 15th. Tottenham Hotspur, like I said, have lost to Ipswich. Tottenham Hotspur have lost to Palace. And this was before injuries. This was before we got into this position. We've lost to Wolves this season. We've lost to Everton. We've lost to Leicester. For Christ's sake, I think we have 13 losses in the Premier League this season. And these clubs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them are in relegation battles and they've beaten us this season. And Tottenham Hotspur are 15th. And everybody is still saying they should not sack him. And aside from Tottenham Hotspur being 15th, everybody that is backing Ange right now talking about injuries, you people, if you wanted Ten Hag out, you are an absolute hypocrite. Because this exact same thing happened to Ten Hag last season. Ten Hag was injury ridden. His team was injury ridden. They were so injury ridden, they had to get Reguilon that wasn't getting game time at Tottenham Hotspur into Manchester United. Yet, Ten Hag finished 8th and won the FA Cup. And everybody still called for him to be sacked. If anything, the only reason why Ten Hag only had a job into this season was because he won a trophy. And yet they didn't give Ten Hag this much mercy. The media went saying, oh, we need to stick with him, The media went saying that. Nobody was saying that for Ten Hag. I'm seeing Paul Merson, 56 minutes ago, Paul Merson urges Spurs to stick with Ange Postecoglou. They weren't saying that about Ten Hag. And if anything, if anybody deserved a chance, it was Ten Hag. Because in his first season, he finished 3rd in the Premier League and won the Carabao Cup in his first season. This was with players like Ronaldo leaving. This was with players like Ronaldo leaving the club. In his second season, he had a lot of injuries. They still finished 8th in the Premier League. And they still won the FA Cup. Yet, somebody will tell me Ange Postecoglou, who finished 5th, won nothing. And the second season, the exact same situation that Ten Hag was in, and now you don't want to keep the same energy. You don't want to treat him the same way you treated Ten Hag, when Ten Hag even had more credits in the bank. I don't think that's fair. Calling a spade a spade. I do understand that you might have your bias. You might want to back this manager. But call a spade a spade. If Ten Hag was in the exact same situation and people were calling for him to be sacked, and this was a manager that had credits in the bank, this was a manager that finished in the top 3 in the Premier League, this was a manager that in his first season he won the Carabao Cup, his second season, injury-ridden season, he finished 8th, which seems like a glorious position now. If Tottenham will finish 8th, I will thank my stars. He finished 8th and he won the FA Cup. In his second season, in 2 seasons, he won 2 trophies. And everybody still wanted him to get sacked. Nobody liked him. Because the media didn't like him, everybody wanted him to get sacked. But Ange Postecoglou, for some reason, even with all these things I mentioned, everybody is still saying we should keep Ange. We should keep Ange. Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't understand. And look, I'm somebody who tries to see things from every angle. I'm going to call a spade a spade. And I'm not going to act like there are not some deeper issues. I don't understand the context of this season. I don't understand that certain things have contributed to us being in this position, to Ange being in this position. But guys, this is arguably the best squad we've had since Pochettino. And this Tottenham side, at the start of the season, if anybody had told you that we'll be 15th, that would have 13 losses, 23 games in, you would not have believed it. And with the squad we had coming into the season, I know people are going to say injuries, but I think the manager has contributed to that because there are lots of hamstring injuries. But that aside, if you want to see my argument for Ange and why we shouldn't exactly put all the blame on me, you can go and watch my video. But honestly speaking, this manager isn't good enough. I don't think he is. And I think that this man is getting away with murder because of the injuries. And it's funny because I know that, or I believe that eventually he would be sacked. But I just hope it's not too late for Tottenham when he does eventually get sacked. I just hope we are not down in the Championship when he gets sacked. Because, like I said, a lot of people are hiding behind injuries, but this isn't just about injuries. From January last season, we saw, I've just gone through everything from the first 11 games this season when we had Romero and Van de Ven, or Van de Ven available, we saw. So don't blame it on injuries anymore and call it spade a spade. This manager isn't good enough for Tottenham Hotspur. Yes, Daniel Levy is at fault for certain things, but Ange Postecoglou is definitely, in my opinion, the North London Ten Hag. He is the North London Ten Hag. So guys, if you like what you heard, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time on London Narratives.